Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. The Trump administration is going to war with leakers. The Attorney General Jeff Sessions held a press conference today warning that leak investigations have tripled compared to the administration before. The Attorney General vowed to bring criminal charges against leakers who are successfully identified. Watch this.
Let me say that I strongly agree with the President and condemn in the strongest terms the staggering number of leaks undermining the ability of our government to protect this country. Leaks are incredibly damaging to our intelligence mission and capabilities. Simply put, these leaks hurt our country. Finally, here is what I want to tell every American today. This nation must end this culture of leaks. We will investigate and seek to bring criminals to justice. We will not allow rogue anonymous sources with security clearances to sell out our country.
Well, the administration has reason to be upset. These aren't just conventional political leaks set out there by appointees. What's going on with Scaramucci? Is Bannon getting fired? Who cares? That happens in every administration. These are big-time leaks by career intelligence people, like the ones you saw earlier this week. Leaks of Trump's phone calls with world leaders. Not just embarrassing, damaging to national security for real. Even Democrats who are sober enough to admit it will admit it. Not good for America. So, of course, you can count on California Congresswoman Maxine Waters to be completely in favor of them. More leaks, she says. Watch.
These confidential conversations that he had with Mexico and Australia that were just illegally leaked to the Washington Post. There's a lot of Democrats that are disturbed by this because it threatens our national security. Are you disturbed by it?
No, not at all. I am so glad they're telling us what's going on.
Of course, that happened on The View, needless to say. Don't worry about the country's well-being. After all, there are political points to be scored. Brian Dean Wright is a former CIA officer. Joseph diGenova is a former U.S. attorney, and they join us both tonight. Brian, first to you, a leak like this of a conversation between the president and another head of state. I've lived here a long time. I've never seen anything like that. Where would that come from?
Agreed. Boy, that is going to be Sessions' greatest challenge. Certainly, there could be an individual within the White House, but I suspect it's probably somebody within the National Security Council or even perhaps within the agency that got access to it. But the bottom line, you made the critical point, which is doing these kinds of leaks damage the president's ability to keep the country safe and to ensure that our interests are advanced. And by the way, it's not just President Trump. It's going to be future presidents who are going to step into that chair, into that Oval Office, and have that challenge of world leaders who want to talk to the president about something very difficult, very sensitive, but are going to be worried about, is it going to leak? Am I going to be damaged by this politically? That's why these kinds of leaks matter.
Joe, I'm not a conspiracy nut at all. I hear a lot of talk about the deep state. I try and shrug it off. But some of this stuff makes the hair on my arm stand up, because what it essentially is a transfer of power from voters who thought they got to decide who the president was, what the policies are, to permanent employees who are now telling us we're in charge. How can you function as an administration if there's no privacy at all? Everything you do or say winds up in the paper.
You cannot. This is a threat to the functioning of the presidency itself. The presidency thrives on transparency on public affairs matters. It thrives on privacy and secrecy and confidentiality in matters of intelligence and foreign policy. What I find fascinating about this is that this is a continuum of the deep state rebellion by civil servants inside the government and political operatives of the last administration who left. That's why what's necessary are a couple of very big, very strong, in terrorem grand juries with subpoenas to a bunch of people who had access to this information. Believe me, you can find out who did this if you really want to.
So, Brian, what scares me is not the leaks from the political appointees. A lot of them are hacks. I get leaks from them all the time. They're fine. It's low-grade stuff. Who's up, who's down. But you never think that the permanent employees, people like you worked in a federal agency, would become this political, in effect. When you worked over at CIA, was that common?
No, incredibly rare. Look, the vast majority of CIA, NSA officers, so that low-level, middle-tier folks who are working out in the field, working at Langley, they're doing God's work. It would not have been something coming from those folks. This is coming from, as your guest noted, from more high-level individuals who have served either in the previous administration or may even be serving in this current administration that just have access to grind. They do it because of reasons of ego or pride, right? They want to be seen as important, you know, so they get in front of folks like Washington Post or New York Times, and they spread this stuff because of a desire to be known, to be important. So I agree that again, with your previous guest, that we have got to focus on getting a very high-profile, very clear prosecution of these folks to send a shiver through the spines of folks at Langley, at the National Security Council, and in fact at NSA to say this has to stop.
Yeah, because they have too much power. I mean, they have a lot of power, and if you can't trust them, then it becomes dangerous. Joe, I see some of this as ideological. I'm sure some of these people, just like talking to Washington Post reporters, a lot of them seem to hate the president's Russia policy because they hate Iran, and Russia and Iran are allied in Syria. Voters voted for that Russia policy. Like, he was really open about it. Do you see this as basically an attempt by people with a very different worldview to impose that worldview on the government regardless of election results?
Absolutely. This is a rebellion against the vote of the American people for a specific policy. These individuals, both in the civil service and in the senior political ranks who have left the government, the Obama people, led by John Brennan, the most political CIA director in history, who set the tone for this type of partisan behavior in the intelligence concept. They are encouraging these people to continue to leak and basically to commit regicide. I mean, they want to kill the president politically, and they'll do it any way they can.
Boy, I was hoping you all would make me feel better. You both served in government for a long time, but you made me feel even more afraid and upset. So thanks for nothing. Brian, Joe, thank you.
Thank you.